Spider-Man Miles Morales is a continuation of Marvel's Spider-Man set 1 year after the latter, and is focused on the eponymous character's journey of living up to the name of Spider-Man. And I should emphasize that this is a continuation and not a sequel. I guess you could say it like a continuation is not a sequel, but a sequel is a continuation. Sony Vice President Simon Ritter explained it best, calling Morales, quote, an expansion and an enhancement to the previous game, end quote. I couldn't have said it better myself. Morales works as a short solo adventure after the Avengers level threat that was the first game, and I appreciate that. It's almost like the first game was the perfect Spider-Man movie, and Morales is the perfect mini-series tie-in to hold us off into the inevitable sequel. And as AAA game development steadily takes more time and money every single year, I've begun to appreciate smaller games more. The key to why Morales is so fun is its goal. It wasn't just to hold fans over until Spider-Man 2, but to simultaneously expand and evolve on its predecessor. And in a lot of ways, it succeeded. But there are some small yet significant parts that did end up rubbing me the wrong way. I can't say that naturally, rubbing me the wrong way. What the fuck, man? Also, there are no spoilers in this video. The footage you're seeing is only from the first couple of hours in the game before the bridge sequence. Everything in this video, from what I talk about to what I show on screen, will be very early in the game, so don't worry. And on that note, I feel like we should start off with first impressions. Specifically the first thing you see when you boot up the game, which are the graphics. I usually don't focus on this unless there's like a big problem or there's a big hoopla about them, but since this is a next generation game, I feel like I do need to mention it in some capacity. I played this on my PS4, and despite this release technically being last gen, Miles Morales looks and runs great, both the character and the game. Loading times feel way shorter despite installing this on the same old terabyte hard drive the system came with. A rough estimate of how long the game takes to load could range from about 7 seconds if you're like retrying a mission, to about 30 seconds if you're just booting up the game. If you compare that to Marvel's Avengers, the other next-gen superhero game, it's almost a night and day difference. Overall, when it comes to Miles Morales, nothing feels like a massive downgrade when compared to the PlayStation 5 footage. Now sure, when I do get to play both Spider-Man games on PlayStation 5 in the far future, I'll look back at this video and laugh my ass off. But especially if you can't afford the next-gen consoles right now, buying this on PlayStation 4 will do you just fine. The only major issues I ran into were some pretty bad freezing and frame rate drops at the last hour or so of my playthrough. Now, I did play the entire game in one 8-hour long session, so maybe, just maybe, that had something to do with it. I also had some glitches, like Miles clipping through the floor, or his body just not existing at the start of a specific side mission. That last one seems to be a problem that other people have had when playing this game, like Chris Stuckman. So yeah, besides that stuff that will hopefully get patched out, the game usually runs very smoothly on a 7-year-old console. Fuck, I'm old! But you should be aware that there are some minor bugs and frame rate issues. However, the PS5 release has also had some of these issues, so take that as you will. When it comes to gameplay, this is where the game will shine for a lot of people, specifically those who loved the first game, like me. Pretty much everything that the first game did well, Morales does with its own spin on it. Much like Into the Spider-Verse, Morales really takes the be yourself tagline to heart, and that individuality flows through the entire game. The attacks, finishers, special attacks, gadgets, UI, and as well as the fighting and swinging mechanics are all new and completely unique to this game. Miles is smaller and more nimble, but is more prone to falling flat in his face and even dying. So for those like me who have always wanted the quintessential modern teenage Spider-Man game, I think Morales fits the bill. Miles is far more underpowered than Peter was, and that makes sense. This is a new Spider-Man. But the Venom powers and camouflage do add a bit of an edge, especially on a New Game Plus playthrough. The new gadgets provide more challenges due to their lack of quantity and, let's just say, unique style. The easier thing to do would have been to just copy and paste the powers from last time, but instead we're given gadgets that are not only underpowered, but are more fitting to our new Spider-Man's abilities, forcing those of us who learned the first game like the back of our hand to adapt to these completely new gadgets and their usability. Is usability even a word? I could look it up. It's too late, I don't want to look it up, I'm too lazy. Air tricks have carried over from last time, but now they're easier to use since you only have to press square, and they're even available at the start of the game, thank God. Even dating back to the Spider-Man 2 days, air tricks have been sorely underutilized. They had to be bought, and in the first Spider-Man game, They were done by pressing both triangle and circle. Don't know whose idea that was, but it was a thing. And now they're easier to use, they add venom power as well as XP, and they also just look cool as shit, my guy. You can even Venom Dash and Venom Jump, allowing you to do some pretty impressive swinging. City activities have been updated. There are the same old challenges, hideouts, and random crimes from the first game, but there are even new crimes to coincide with this game's new gang, the Underground. All of them add that new flair that random crimes have needed desperately. While crimes are good in the last game, they've basically been the same since Spider-Man 2, so it's good to see some new ones. Boss fights are a little standard. There's only about 4 of them in the main campaign, with 2 of them being the same character. The other 2 aren't bad. On my first playthrough, they felt but after revisiting them and taking the time to learn their strategy, they're not that bad. They're good, they're just not memorable. Especially the final fight, which just drags on forever on amazing difficulty. In terms of visual spectacle, Morales definitely one-ups the first game's climax, but at least for me, it disappointed when it came to the emotional weight. And that's the biggest issue. When it comes to its narrative, it does feel a little bit contrived, especially when compared to any other Spider-Man story. The game is only about 7 to 8 hours long, so I wasn't expecting anything groundbreaking, and it's still better than the Avengers or even Star Wars Squadrons, but it just doesn't live up to the level of quality of that first game in terms of story beats. While not spoiling anything, there are exact parallels to the previous game. From specific scenes to entire characters, so much to the point where I can understand if that fucks with somebody's enjoyment of the game. The narrative just also feels rushed. Like, this whole story could fit into a 15-ish hour long game like the first one, but it's not, so certain big reveals are just kind of plopped into your lap, but there's no time to take it in. You just gotta keep it going. And this is probably why the main villains of this game just aren't really all that interesting. I ended up liking the secondary villains more because they either got more development or were just enjoyably evil. So when you try to have a sympathetic villain like the first game, but you have like half the time to develop them, it's just not gonna work all that well. And I enjoyed the ending significantly less because of the lack of emotion there. Now, the blow of this rushed, rehashed plot is lessened by the main characters and the internal drama. Like most Spider-Man stories, the actual story beats are as old as the character himself, but it's the writing, dialogue, and voice acting that does the actual heavy lifting. It's what makes these kinds of superhero stories so appealing over and over again, but especially Spider-Man. Morales still continues his goal of being the ideal Spider-Man universe. By combining multiple interpretations and trying to find the root of these characters, these games still feel like they're trying to be the quote-unquote perfect Spider-Man, even when they do occasionally fall short. So yeah, when directly compared to the chef's kiss that was Spider-Man 2018, Miles Morales does slip up a little when it comes to the story, arguably the biggest thing besides the swinging that keeps us all coming back. But that's not really fair. I still think the story could have been done way better if it was given more time or if they just chose a smaller scope. But on the flip side of that, if you are going into Miles Morales expecting the next perfect superhero game that will just blow your socks and cocks off, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. But if you come into this expecting the next smaller scale chapter of an ongoing series that just gives the perspective to a whole new hero, then I honestly think that you'll have a great time. Especially if you love Miles Morales, Into the Spider-Verse, the Ultimate Spider-Man continuity as a whole, or if you just love the Christmas season. Call me a fool, but I love seasonal video games, especially those that are set at the most wonderful time of the year. I don't know, man, I really can't explain it. There's just something about Spider-Man in winter that just hits different. If you loved Spider-Man 2018, PS4, or whatever the fuck we're calling it now, if you have an extra spot in your Christmas list for your grandma, or if you just got a PlayStation 5 or PS4 and are wanting a new game to play, then I think that Spider-Man Miles Morales would do pretty nicely. As someone who platinumed it only 2 days after release, yes, I am flexing my lack of a life. What the fuck are you gonna do about it? I personally think that the 8-hour campaign, all the side content, as well as the achievements, will hold you over for at least the holiday season, just as long as you're not addicted to this shit as I am. So that's all I got for you guys. I may make a spoiler-filled video about this game, I'm not too sure yet. Comment below if you want me to make that. Anyways, I gotta do the YouTuber thing now. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'm being serious. Only 1.8% of you are subscribed. If you're watching this, hit that fucking like button, physically assault it! I'll catch you guys next time. Later, kids. Have a good night. I'm sweating fucking buckets in here.
Thank you.